And given the nature of the finger pointing and the attempts to cast blame on other parties as to who chose GC Strategies, and given the RCMP investigation, without suggesting at any point in time that Mr. Doan has attempted to mislead this committee, I think it prudent, sir, to have this witness sworn to tell the truth.
I, Min Duan, do solemnly, sincerely,
and truly
affirm and declare the taking of any oath
is according to my religious belief and lawful.
Is according to my religious belief and lawful. I do also solemnly, sincerely, and truly affirm and declare
that the evidence I shall give on this examination
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
I confirm that the witness has been sworn in.
This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Doan, for your attendance today and your opening statement. It would be prudent for me, sir, to remind you of a couple of things. I specifically ask that you be sworn for a reason. Even though when witnesses attend at committee, there is a parliamentary privilege that whether people are sworn in or not, it would still be considered a contempt of Parliament to mislead the committee by giving a false statement or false evidence, to refuse unless related to cabinet confidences, to answer any questions, or to fail to produce documents that this committee might require someone to produce. That is generally what happens. I specifically asked that you be sworn, given the swirl of accusations that are flowing around from senior government officials as to who retained GC Strategies. So you were sworn because now this attracts criminal code consideration. I understand you have a lawyer, sir, and that would be very prudent for you to do that. But there are provisions in the criminal code that penalize perjury, deliberately giving misleading evidence, which, if founded, if there's a finding of guilt, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, could land a witness in prison for up to 14 years. So you've got both of those issues to contend with, but I say that not to intimidate. I say that not to concern you. I say that not to force you to clam up and consider your instructions from legal counsel. I say that because, sir, I want to give you a safe place in this committee. There were a lot of accusations hurled at you by Mr. Cameron MacDonald, and I have some serious reservations regarding his truthfulness with respect to those accusations. So this is your opportunity, Mr. Doan, to finally set the record straight. So he, on a number of occasions, has accused you that, notwithstanding his position as Director General of Innovation, this particular ArriveCAN app surely would fall within his mandate as an innovative product. He's accused you of selecting GC Strategies. You, on the other hand, sir, when you testified on October the 24th, 2023, not once, but I counted it on 4 different occasions over the course of that 2-hour meeting, questions from numerous members of this committee from all political stripes claimed that you still don't know who ultimately selected GC Strategies. And in fact, you even went so far to say you've been trying to find the answer for close to a year. You use references to my team made that decision, but then your team consists of 1,600 employees. That doesn't make sense. Then you narrowed that down to potentially 6 director generals. I narrowed that down to Cameron MacDonald, who's largely responsible for innovation. So we have numerous competing theories as to who chose GC Strategies. And I can understand. I think Canadians can understand why no one wants to take ownership. This is a two-person consulting firm that doesn't produce a product, that doesn't operate out of a brick and mortar entity, largely works out of their basement, and has, over the course of a number of years, but in relation to ArriveCan, hit the taxpayer lottery. $9 million for doing nothing other than finding professionals to do the work. It's a pretty good gig. I bet you there are millions of Canadians who would love that opportunity. So I can understand why you and others who've testified don't want to be attached to this particular company who is under police investigation. So I've got about a minute and a half, sir. I'm going to have numerous opportunities to question you in the course of 2 hours. But I'm going to give you this opportunity to give me the straight goods. Was Mr. McDonald lying to this committee as he's accused you of?
Thank you for the chair. The question that I was asked at committee and that I answered truthfully was who picked GC Strategies. As I said in my opening statement, I chose a direction to in-house. In there, in the material I found, there's no evidence that that decision was tied to a particular company. I stand behind that decision. That decision allowed us to build ArriveCan. That decision allowed us to build over 2.5 years of changes as the pandemic evolved.
Mr. Goldman, stop you right there. I got 30 seconds. Please answer the question. Was Mr. McDonald lying to committee on November the 7th, 2023, when he placed the entire responsibility for that decision to hire GC Strategies at your lap? Was he lying or was he telling the truth?
Mr. McDonald said that I made the decision. I did make a decision, to be clear. I made a decision on a technical direction. Also in evidence, and as posted on the Globe and Mail, in his own handwriting, he writes, I did not make that decision, nor was I even familiar with the company.
What was your involvement with the Bottler contract?
Thank you for the question. CBSA was handling a lot of sexual misconduct. It was in the news. It was an issue that we were all seized with, given how serious it was. We were briefed on a meeting with the executive team that the misconduct was increasing and that we needed a different way to solve this problem. I was the chief information officer at the time. The president turned to me and asked me, is there a different way from a technology perspective, an innovative perspective, to solve this problem or make a difference? Because everything we've done so far wasn't making the difference that was required to stop this. So I turned to Mr. McDonald, again, who was DG of Innovation, and we were looking for innovation. We were looking for something different. We were looking for a different approach because the traditional approaches around training and awareness weren't sufficient. Mr. McDonald took that and went away and found a company that would be Bottler AI, that would use artificial intelligence to help provide a different way for victims or potential victims to have a conversation with this anonymous bot to see if they actually did suffer sexual misconduct. And it gave them a very safe space. I found the solution very promising. A demo was made before me and a number of my director generals in which I saw a lot of promise in this technology and in this way of achieving a safe space for victims to potentially consult, get guidance, and then decide on what actions they wanted to take. I saw enough promise.
But there was no contract with GC Strategies or Bottler with CBSA at that point, or at any point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was late 2019, and I saw enough promise in their demo, and also I was moved by Mrs. Dutt's personal story around harassment and discrimination and why she created this company, that I recommended that this is worthy to be presented to the president. Unfortunately, in the beginning of March 2020, the pandemic hit, and that meeting was delayed by several months before we were able to get in front of the president and the VP of HR.
So why did it not proceed? If it didn't, the agreements or the possibility of having a contract with GC Strategies and Bottler, albeit through subcontracting with the other two organizations, it didn't proceed because I'm being told conflicting stories. You're saying it was delayed because of the pandemic. Others are saying it didn't happen because they didn't fulfill the requirements necessary to do the work?
Merci pour la question, Monsieur le Président. En fin de 2019,
Thank you very much for the question. I saw that there was a lot of potential late 2019, but I was afraid of approving a pilot project, so I said to myself, let's broach the VP of Human Resources and the President and see if there's any interest in it. That occurred far later in 2020, and once it was approved, well, we used an existing contract with Dalian and Corodex to start the work with Bottler. Based on what I heard recently in committee proceedings, and I wasn't aware of this at the time, Dalian subcontracted out to GC Strategies, and thereafter, and potentially, and I don't know how GC Strategies would have subcontracted out to Bottler, but in any event, we don't know how that occurred exactly.
Has the RCMP contacted you in regards to allegations made by Bottler?
thank you for the question. No, they have not.
Was Bottler at all involved with ArriveCan?
No, they were not.
Is the RCMP investigating the ArriveCan contracts?
Thank you for the question. Not to my knowledge.
So, in your understanding, there is nothing you can do now, given that you know that the CBSA has suspended activities with these companies. There's nothing you can do in your role as CTO.
My role within, I would offer that would be something that PSPC would have a more informed opinion on.
Well, don't they rely on the CTO to give them advice?
Actually, no, they do not.
So the CTO has no input at all if they see a company that is being accused of violations of getting further contracts with the federal government, with the government of Canada.
My role is around the technology direction. It is not from a values and access of companies, different parts of the organization, primarily PSPC.
Regardless of the values.
My
So
role,
the values don't matter.
My role as in terms of Chief Technology Officer is not to be involved in that type of procurement activity. There are different parts of the organization that does that. I set technical direction. I was not consulted on this decision.
Thank
or
you,
engaged.
gentlemen. It is our time. Mr. Genuis, please, go ahead.
Mr. Doan, from what I understand, there were initially 6 companies that were identified that could have built this app. Is that correct? And who were the 6 companies?
Thank you for the question. I'm not aware of who the 6 companies were. I know of the 3 of them. One of them was Apple, the second one was Deloitte, and the other one was a hybrid solution that would use most of our existing coding and technology.
And that so-called hybrid solution was the GC Strategies one.
That ultimately became the GC Strategies one. Yes, it was.
Okay. So, sir, it seems the core point of contention comes down to, well, one of the core points of contention comes down to who chose GC Strategies. $54 million went through this company. It's a 2-person company working out of their basement. No in-house IT expertise whatsoever. Did very well financially off this contract. So everybody wants to know who actually made the choice to hire GC Strategies, and anybody who might have been responsible for that decision is telling us that they weren't involved. You have testified that you did not choose this company. However, you've also testified that you were presented with 2 models of service delivery. One of those, you say, was fully outsourced, and the other one was partially outsourced. And so you made the choice without knowing which company was associated with which bid. You made the choice to choose the partially outsourced as opposed to the fully outsourced solution. Is that your testimony essentially?
I chose a direction, and it was partially outsourced as actually staff augmentation. If I could clarify one part, GC Strategies did not receive $54 million. So I've heard numbers here at 9 million or 11 million. They did not receive that much.
54 million went through, was spent on ArriveCan, went through GC. But I want to just focus on the piece about the decision you made, right? So you were presented with a choice between a fully outsourced option and a partially outsourced option, and you gave the direction, you made the decision to say you want the partially outsourced option. Is that correct?
Made that decision.
Pardon me?
I made the decision to go to a model that would use staff augmentation and our existing cloud and leverage existing code. I made that decision.
You made that decision, and you are telling us that you, at the time you made that decision, had no idea that there were specific companies associated with specific options. Like nobody mentioned that GC Strategies is presenting this option and Deloitte is presenting this option. You made that recommended technology direction in complete ignorance about which companies were behind which option. Is that what you're telling us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is not what I'm telling you. I would like to remind the committee that this was not a $54 million in March of 2020.
That's not my question, sir. That's not my question. Answer the question, and you have an obligation to answer the question. That's part of the way this process works.
I am answering the question.
No, you're not. You're telling me that you were not ignorant of which companies were involved. So when you were presented with these two options, a fully outsourced option and a not fully outsourced option, you're telling me you knew at the time that Deloitte was behind one of them and GC Strategies was behind the other?
GC Strategies behind the other, and all the evidence I found will support what I just said.
Pardon me, can you repeat that, please?
I am saying that I was aware that one of them was Deloitte, and I was not aware that the other one's GC Strategies, and all the evidence I found supporting this decision around that time will support what I said. There are no mentions of GC Strategies.
So someone came to you and they said, we have the option of fully outsourcing to Deloitte, or we have the option of a partial outsourcing solution, but we're not going to tell you who the company involved is, and then you made the decision. Is that how it happened?
So about 10 days before this started, the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic.
Sir, not what we're talking about. Not what we're talking about at all. Did you answer my question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an important context. 5 days later, Canada closed its borders. 4 days later, we unprecedentedly closed the borders with the United States.
So you're already accused of lying to this committee. Could you? I think it's in your interest to be forthright and direct, and you have an obligation to be forthright and direct in any event. Is my description of events correct? Namely, that when presented with this choice, you were given either fully outsourced to Deloitte or this partially outsourced solution in which they didn't tell you what the company was involved, and you made the decision in the absence of that information. Is that what you're claiming?
Very quick answer, Mr. Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The decision wasn't partially outsourced. It's staff augmentation, and it was to build an app to replace a form. That was all it was. It was not a $54 million decision. We didn't know that simple app.
So you're not answering my question.
That is our time.
So Mr. Doan, are you saying because you don't follow sports, you don't know what it means when a company's put in the penalty box?
Thank you for the question. No, c'est pas ça j'ai dit. J'ai dit,
That's not what I said. It's not an expression that I'm not aware of, but there's a big difference between an expression that I use myself often.
Why was Deloitte specifically in the penalty box?
For the question, again, I don't remember using the word penalty box. We were working with them on a major project. And from a major project perspective...
A $400 million project, you think you would have a really good idea what they were doing wrong. I mean, why were the cost overruns? Why was it taking too long? I mean, why? If you're punishing them, they've done something wrong. What did they do wrong?
I don't know who punished who. No, there was no punishment involved. These major projects, the problems are joint. In terms of, it could be around business requirements, it could be around changing scope, it could be because it's taken some time, the technology has evolved. So it's not necessarily one party, and usually in my experience, it's both parties that need to sort through it and negotiate it and make change requests as well. I don't know.
Typically, you don't punish or put a company in the penalty box, especially a company that size on a project that size, without something going on. I mean, this is really a big problem for this committee. We can't get straight answers from anyone, it seems, on the questions we're asking. And I'm just trying to get to the bottom of this, just some straight goods. Can you tell me anything that this committee should be aware of why Deloitte was in the penalty box or pushed out or whatever you want to come up with?
I'm afraid that is our time, but perhaps we can go back to it on your next round, Mr. Johns. Mr. Duncan, please, for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Doan, at the beginning of my comments here, I just want to remind you of the swearing in and oath you took here this afternoon. And a witness who refuses to answer questions or fails to reply truthfully may give rise to a charge of contempt of the House. In many rounds now, we've been asking some basic questions and not getting answers. We've been getting skating around it. So I'm going to try again, building on what Mr. Jennis had said earlier. The word you're using very specifically is you picked a technical direction, but Mr. Jennis did ask you in a previous round, when you made the decision to go in-house with a hybrid model, can you confirm again that you were completely unaware in that hybrid model who those outsourced contracts may be? Yes or no? Did you know that GC Strategies or anyone was involved at that time?
Merci pour la question. Le témoignage puis
Thank you for the question. The evidence supports what I said. In no case did the hybrid option mention GC Strategies. Not at all. In no single document, in no single email is the word GC Strategies mentioned.
To go with a in-house model, a hybrid blend as you call it, and picked a technical decision, and you had no clue who would actually be working on the project. You're telling Canadians that this is the case, that you made a decision worth tens of millions of dollars worth of sole source contracts that came down, and you just said, we'll do it in-house and doesn't matter who the outside contractors are. That wasn't even a thought for you in making a decision one way or the other that you might want to know who it is?
Thank you for the question. I've said it previously, but I will repeat. It was not a multi-million-dollar decision. It was not a $54 million decision. It was a decision to have one application up in 6 weeks to replace a piece of paper that cost $80,000. So I trusted my DGs who are delegated to do these things to get it done, and Mr. McDonald got it done.
Well, I would say your decisions led to 4 sole source contracts going between April 2020 and May 2022, valued at $43.1 million. So I would argue your decisions did have some consequence. So I want to provide you the opportunity as well. You've been to the committee and there's been many challenges with some of the testimony of what we've heard, to say the least. Many accusations have been made against you regarding you being the one that made the decision and aware of what was going on. But your wording today has picked a technical direction, and you reference other people on your team are the ones that made the final decision to go with GC Strategies, among others, and no names have been given. I want to provide you an opportunity again. If it wasn't you that made the decision, then name the name of who did it.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. I was the one who made the final decision. I'm responsible for it. The buck stops with me. The question that you're asking me is who contacted GC Strategies to ask them to solicit bids. There's a difference between those two things. Who made the call? I don't know. I still don't know. But based on what I've understood, this is under investigation by CBSA currently.
I go back again. So if it was not you, you've not gone through any of your research, any of the documents that you've asked and been given to. Everyone's pointing the fingers at you to say you're the one that made the decision. Your quote's only a technical direction, yet nobody in all the testimony that we're hearing this way is taking responsibility for what happened. So perhaps what I can just say is, who's going to take responsibility here? Do you take any responsibility for what happened here? You haven't provided the person through all the documentation notes you've been given and going through. You haven't pinpointed how tens of millions of dollars of sole source contracts got awarded over multiple years. And that whole starting point, just say, oh, I'm not sure who it was and it doesn't really matter to you. If it wasn't you, do you accept responsibility? And if not, who?
As the CIO, I take full responsibility on that decision to go in that direction. And that decision allowed us to deliver ArriveCan over 2.5 years. You mentioned it was a multi-million-dollar decision. It was not. We, at the time, did not know the pandemic would evolve the way it did. All the messages were, it will be over soon. We didn't know variants were coming. We didn't know vaccine certificates were coming. We didn't know about exempt travelers and everything that ArriveCan had to do. I made a decision. I stand behind it. It cost $54 million and it was value for money. And as far as I'm concerned, it saved lives.
I think there's a lot of Canadians that would struggle to understand how at the beginning of all of this here, making a decision to go in-house and have a hybrid of having an outsourced blend and have multiple companies. So you just made a selection and just didn't happen to ask at any point whether to go outsource or to go in-house with the hybrid model of having consultants and other firms getting sole source contracts, and never bothered to cross your mind in making one recommendation or the other who might be the partners playing and delivering on things. I think Canadians are going to have a very difficult time believing that.
So, Mr. Doan, I'm going to go back to my opening line of questioning to you, because I asked you on 2, possibly 3 occasions, and you didn't give me a straight answer. And my colleague, Mr. Duncan, reminded you about a refusal to answer questions. I'm not interested in your version of a particular question I put to you. I expect a direct response to a direct question. So you've identified a number of areas that Mr. McDonald has accused you of lying. And I'm asking now this very simple question, now a third, possibly a 4th time. Was Mr. McDonald lying at committee when he said the decision to retain GC Strategies on the ArriveCan was yours and yours alone? That is a yes or a no, Mr. Doan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is not a yes or no question.
I'm asking for a yes or no, Mr. Doan.
Thank you, but that is not a yes or no question. I made a technical direction in terms of where to go. That led
Again,
to
Mr.
GC
Doan, I'm not interested in your explanation. Why is it impossible for you? It was easy for Mr. McDonald to accuse you of deliberately lying. Is this something that your lawyer has instructed you not to opine on or to comment? I'm asking you specifically, was Mr. McDonald being truthful with respect to all the lies that he claims that you made when you testified, specifically that it was your decision to retain GC Strategies? It's a yes or a no. Are you incapable of answering a yes or a no?
I am under oath. So the words that come out of my mouth are going to be very, very specific because I am under oath. The question that was asked of me is who picked GC Strategies? I did not make the decision to go with GC Strategies. I picked a direction.
I'm going to stop you right there. You did not make the decision to go with GC Strategies. Mr. McDonald claims that you did. So is he telling the truth or is he lying?
Thank you for the question. If his interpretation of that question is who picked the technical direction that led to it, then that is his interpretation.
He didn't use the words technical direction, and I'm glad you brought up technical direction, because why was it impossible for you to phrase how you were involved with GC Strategies when you last testified before a committee? You went through all these mental gymnastics to try to make us believe, well, it wasn't my decision alone, it was my team, I had 1,600 employees. No one believes you, Mr. Doan. I wanted to give you a safe environment to finally come clean with the truth, and it appears you are incapable of doing it. Someone has to accept responsibility for giving $9 million taxpayer dollars to GC Strategies on the ArriveCan app. That is fact. That is reality. Mr. Firth from GC Strategies confirmed that. I'm asking you, are you accepting responsibility for that, or is Mr. McDonald lying?
As I said many times, I take full responsibility for the technical direction that I took that led to GC Strategies.
I'm going to accept that as a yes. So he was telling the truth that that decision was yours. It wasn't his. Now, he gave you he looked at 6 options before he presented Deloitte and GC Strategies. How incompetent can you be, sir, when you're unable to identify for committee the names of those 4 other companies? Why is that?
You will see in the evidence, this happened over 24 hours. So lots of things were...
1 hour. You're the chief technology officer. Why can't you identify the other 4 companies? We know Deloitte. We know they're in the penalty box. We know it's GC Strategies. Who are the other 4?
I was not involved in that period of time, at that level of time. I trusted Mr. McDonald to do the work and do the assessment over a 24, 48 hours period of time.
Mr. Doan.
I was managing
Mr.
closing
Doan,
the border.
I'll stop you right there. Did it not raise red flags to you that he presents only 2 companies in all of Canada that are actually capable of doing delivery on this ArriveCan app? We know that Deloitte was out of the question. Mr. McDonald knew that Deloitte was in the penalty box, didn't he? That was widely known at the CBSA.
Thank you for the question. He did not present 2 companies. He presented an option, and the other one was to outsource. He did not, at any point in time.
Sir, he claims that Deloitte was his preferred choice. Was he telling the truth or was he lying?
I have found no evidence of that. And actually, I have emails that would recommend using our cloud, using e-declaration for Mr. McDonald.
I'll ask the question. He claims he presents to you 2 options, Deloitte and GC Strategies. And he says to you, as he testified at committee, that his preferred choice was Deloitte, and then you turn that down because you probably confirmed that Deloitte was in the penalty box, and you directed him to go with GC Strategies. Again, Mr. Doan, for the 5th, 6th, 7th time, who is lying? Are you misleading, or was Mr. McDonald misleading when he said that decision, that direction was not his, but yours and yours alone?
Very brief answer, please.
There's an evaluation matrix in here developed by the CBSA that supports my decision and does not recommend the Deloitte approach. That was.
Thank you, Mr. Doan.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to go back, Mr. Doan, to Mr. McDonald's statements last time that he appeared at committee. We talked about a number of lies that he claims that you have made. And now specifically, I want to talk about the alleged threats. In your opening statement, he claims, well, Mr. McDonald claims that he was directly threatened by you on more than one occasion. You claim that that didn't happen, that you did not threaten. So both versions of fact cannot be true at the same time. So I'll ask you again, is your version truthful, and was Mr. McDonald lying to this committee about you threatening him with respect to the exposure of GC Strategies? Yes or no?
Thank you for the question. My version is truthful. I had never threatened Mr. McDonald. I said if we couldn't have come to an answer that the committee may turn to.
Well, I will, by extension, claim that Mr. McDonald was lying to this committee. I know that you have an aversion to using that language, probably as a result of some legal advice, so I'm not going to push you on that, but clearly you claim now, under oath, that your version is actually accurate. Did you actually seek advice from him on your initial upcoming testimony at this particular committee? He claims that you were so nervous, you were emotional, and at times you were crying, and you were desperate to get some guidance from him, even though he had been removed from the CBSA for close to a year at this point. You wanted guidance on how to testify at OGGO. Was that correct?
Merci pour la question. Ce que j'ai dit tantôt, c'est que j'ai jamais.
Thank you for the question. What I said is I never threatened Mr. McDonald. I did say that I did not threaten him.
On how to testify at your first committee meeting, yes or no?
J'ai demandé à M. McDonald.
I asked Mr. McDonald, and it's in the material here, I asked him if he could help us clarify some facts considering what had happened at the agency in March 2020. He was closer to what had happened.
I have an actual copy of the email that Mr. McDonald wrote on the 29th of October 2022 at 11:28 in the morning. It was sent directly to you. It was CC to Kelly Belanger. It was CC to Carol Sabarin, to Antonio Utano, and to a Josh Bird. This was the subject matter of the Globe and Mail story that broke on October the 4th, 2023. I'm not going to read to you, sir, the exact 7 pages of the email, but certain excerpts of that. So Mr. McDonald says to you, you asked me for advice on the key question of why GC strategies, but I also think we are all grappling with who selected GC strategies, that he wrote in on the October 29th, 2022 email. So let me stop you right there. So at this point, despite you telling this committee about all of the information that you picked a technical direction, you were prepared, sir, to take the advice of Mr. McDonald to claim ignorance, that you weren't aware as to who directly chose GC strategies, because you said that on 4 occasions in your previous testimony. You said it was part of my team, and you weren't able to identify with clarity that you are today, sir, with respect to the technical direction. So that concerns me. Mr. McDonald's email contains several suggested answers for the executives. As an example, I will start by saying that I was not personally familiar with GC strategies during the time in question, the document states, although it's unclear which executive would be expected to deliver that line. The email also predicts some of the questions they will be asked. If pressed, come on, we want some accountability here. Who decided? How did this company get a contract for almost $9 million? Who made money off of this? Who is getting rich off of taxpayer dollars, the document states, followed by a recommended response. Another question, Mr. Chair, I stand by my statement that I don't believe there was a single person, and I'm not actually aware of any rules being broken or wrongdoing. This is not how we operate at the CBSA. This exchange, this email with coaching on what to say and anticipated questions by committee is so disturbing on so many levels, sir. It's akin to obstructing justice. My former career as a Crown attorney would elicit a police investigation if this type of evidence came out with respect to a trial or a hearing. Parliament is a little different, but it's still disturbing to me, sir, on many, many levels that you sought coaching on specifically what to say and to not accept responsibility for GC strategies. Have you been coached today, sir, on what to say and what not to say?
Thank you for the question. I have not been coached today on what to say. There's an email that documents what I actually requested of Mr. McDonald, and I quote, leaning particularly on your time in the first year when all of this being stood up and the various moving parts, would appreciate your review, addition, and edits to any of this material in prep for the agency's appearance next week.
Thanks, Mr. Doan.
This is, a $10 million reward for 2 individuals over a couple of years. Do you see anything wrong with that, given that they don't have an office or any staff? You said that, we understand it's value for money, that their job is to do screening, vetting, to connect people. I mean, they altered resumes. They fraudulently changed resumes. That's how the screening went. In terms of vetting, I mean, no one signed any security briefing or screening forms. There was no NDA that was ever signed or a confidentiality agreement. I mean, this sounds like a disaster in terms of value for money. Would you not agree that there should be some changes?
Thank you for the question. The allegations around CV changing, I'm not part of any of those investigations, and I can't speak to that. In terms of the subcontracting model, this exists everywhere. This exists in the private sector, in the construction business or others. So this is a model.
Well, it shouldn't exist in the federal government. So $10 million, do you not believe that you could hire a firm for $10 million or actually employees within the department, $10 million, hire 2 individuals that could do this kind of work?
For ArriveCan, we needed access very quickly, as I've said, to many different types of skills, cybersecurity and others that we didn't necessarily have.
I'm just asking you, do you think you could hire someone with those kind of skills with that kind of money?
The government of Canada is working very actively to increase our IT skills and resources, but we're in very, very hard competition with the private sector who offer much more generous compensation packages for skills like cloud, artificial intelligence, and others. The other reality is it takes a long time to hire somebody from the outside with the government. So a long
process. Not for that kind of money. So Ms. Dutt sent an email, the second email, with allegations of misconduct in December of 2021. Bottler's project was terminated the very next day. I have to say the timing of this stinks of reprisal, especially since just a couple weeks earlier, CBSA was telling Bottler they were assigning new resources to aid the project. So what changed? Why was Bottler's project terminated? And I asked PSPC this question, but they couldn't answer. If you can't, then I'd like CBSA to answer this in writing.
From what I've heard of these committee appearances, there were no allegations in 2021 raised by Bottler. Mr. Utano spoke to this. There was a contracting dispute. PSPC was engaged, and the issue was resolved, from what I understand, fairly quickly. The allegations of wrongdoing from Bottler surfaced in November of 2022.
Resolved, they were turfed.
During his testimony 1 week ago, Mr. McDonald said the following, quote, I believe Mr. Mendocino was not happy. Mr. Mendocino wasn't there when ArriveCan kicked off and when all of this was going on, but there was a lot of news about ArriveCan. Min was worried that either he or Jonathan Moore were going to get fired. So he was talking about somebody's head on a platter. And he said because Jonathan Moore had made a whole bunch of mistakes from an accounting perspective, talking about how much ArriveCan cost, it would go his way or it could go Mr. Doan's way because Mr. Doan was the CIO at the time. Then he turned. We were on the phone, but he stopped the conversation and he just said, you know, Cam, if I have to, I'm going to tell the committee that it was you. End of quote. Mr. Doan, in that section of his testimony, was Mr. McDonald telling the truth?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. I didn't brief Minister Mendocino on this issue. As I said, last year, there were no allegations.
I'm going to jump in there. I asked you a very simple question, and we've had you for almost 2 hours, and you've struggled to give direct answers to simple questions. And I'm not going to go off this one. In that section of his testimony, was Mr. McDonald being truthful, yes or no?
Thank you for the question. I am under oath, so yes, I am being very careful about my statements because I'm under oath. I understand what.
But you still have an obligation to answer questions before a parliamentary committee. You have an obligation to answer those questions, sir, and not doing so is contempt of Parliament. Again, were Mr. McDonald's statements truthful, yes or no?
Thank you for the question. I am trying to answer the question. So there are different elements of that quote that you read to me that in terms of what is truthful, in terms of what is engaging.
Were some elements of that quote untruthful then?
Last year, nobody was looking.
Are there any
to fire
elements
anybody.
of that quote, sir, that are not accurate?
I can get that in writing. Can you repeat the quote for me?
Sir, the quotation, I have limited time, and the quotation was directly from Mr. McDonald's testimony. You heard it. Was
Mr. Generous, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Please repeat the quote. I will allow the extra time. And Mr. Doan, I'm going to just read from you, right from witnesses, for swearing of witnesses procedure and practice. It states, refusal to answer questions or failure to reply may result in a charge of contempt. This has been repeated to you several times today. There have been a lot of direct questions, and I normally don't do this, but there have been very specific questions, and we'd like very specific answers. Taxpayers deserve that. Canadians deserve that. Parliament deserves that. Mr. Generous, I'm going to turn it back over to you if you want to repeat the quote, and I will not take away your time.
Thank you, Chair. The quote is as follows. I believe Mr. Mendocino was not happy. Mr. Mendocino wasn't there when ArriveCan kicked off and when all of this was going on, but there was a lot of news about ArriveCan. Min was worried that either he or Jonathan Moore were going to get fired. So he was talking about somebody's head on a platter. And he said because Jonathan Moore had made a whole bunch of mistakes from an accounting perspective, talking about how much ArriveCan cost, it would go his way or it could go Mr. Doan's way because Mr. Doan was the CIO at the time. Then he turned. We were on the phone, but he stopped the conversation and he just said, you know, Cam, if I have to, I'm going to tell the committee that it was you. End of quote. In that section of his testimony, sir, was Mr. McDonald being fully truthful? Yes or no?
Thank you for the question. No.
Which parts of that quotation are not true from your perspective?
So I've written them in order. So the first one, Mendocino not happy. I would not know that. I would not be privy to that. So I don't know where Mr. McDonald got that. I'm not saying that it came from me. It did not come from me. I was not briefing the minister in the minister's office. Part number two, I was... You asked.
Let's jump in on that point specifically. So you're saying that you didn't have a direct conversation with Mr. Mendocino, but did somebody else tell you that Mr. Mendocino wasn't happy, and did you relay that information to Mr. McDonald? Because he all he said is that you said it. Did you in fact say what he says you said?
I do not recall saying that Mr. Mendocino or any relayed information would have come to me. And at that time, that was not the concern. Can I answer number two and three?
Do you recall at any point, do you recall being told at any point that Minister Mendocino was not happy?
Thank you for the question. No, I do not recall that. Can I answer two and three?
Could you go on with the other errors in his statement that you believe were made?
Number two, either I or the CFO would be fired. I had no fear for my job this time last year. I stand behind the decision. I think it's value for money, and I don't think at any point in time I was afraid for my job. I don't think a public servant doing their job, delivering on something like a Rivecan, would be fired.
Okay.
And
did you at any point tell Mr. McDonald that you would tell the committee that it was him who made the decision?
Thank you for that. I did not threaten to blame him, and I was here a week or two. I was here on October 24th, and I had an opportunity to do so with all the allegations around his name, and I still did not do so.
So you're suggesting that this conversation between you and Mr. McDonald is entirely fabricated?
Thank you for the question. I did have a conversation with Mr. McDonald. I did reach out to him. There's evidence of this. I reached out and asked him for facts and data because he was there at the time. I did have the conversation. The point of the conversation was help us understand who invited GC Strategies in to Rivecan at the first time. We absolutely did have a conversation.
Okay, but these various particular points you're saying are not accurate. With respect to the minister's office, did you have any information shared with you about the perspective of the minister or the minister's office in relation to this procurement?
Thank you for the question. I do not recall anything from that perspective, or from the minister's office, or from the minister, and I was not briefing the minister on this topic.
Did you receive any direction along these lines regarding Deloitte, regarding the selection, regarding how people felt about it from Mr. Osowski, Ms. O'Gorman at any points?
I do not recall getting any direction on any of these matters. In terms of technical direction, this would not be something that a deputy minister would normally get involved in.
Okay, so to summarize your testimony, you were given two options. You knew that Deloitte was behind one of the options. You did not know that GC Strategies was behind the other. You chose the option for the company that involved a company that you weren't aware of. You don't know who made the decision regarding GC Strategies. You at no point heard from or consulted with your bosses within the department. And Mr. McDonald fully fabricated significant aspects of your conversation with him. I find that testimony quite unbelievable, frankly. But that's what you have to say?
Yes. And that is our time, Mr. Genuis. Perhaps Mr. Doan, thanks for joining us today. You had mentioned earlier how a Rivecan saved lives. Would you provide in writing to us quantifying that statement? We've heard it repeatedly by people that witness stand about how it's miraculously saved lives. Could you let us know how many and quantify exactly how it saved lives if you're making that statement? And then please just get back to us in writing with that, please. Mr. Genuis, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Chair. I think we don't face the same resource constraints that we maybe normally do. And the witness has been fairly evasive, but has provided some somewhat more direct answers just in the last few minutes. I do wonder if there would be will of the committee to extend for another round.
The witness has agreed to stay a bit longer, Mr. Genuis.
Well, thank you, Chair. Mr. McDonald also said during his testimony, quote, Min Doan made the decision to go with GC Strategies because of the fact that he had been told that he could not use Deloitte. Mr. Doan, was that statement by Mr. McDonald accurate?
Thank you for the question. I was never told not to use Deloitte.
Okay. Did you imply in conversation with Mr. McDonald that you've been told not to use Deloitte?
I did not imply not to use Deloitte. What I asked and what my concern was the outsourced solution.
Okay. So you were presented with two options. You came back and you said, "Well, I prefer the partial option in effect." Now, did you ask any questions? Did you say, "Hey, could you explain why?" What companies might be behind it? Did you have any inkling what companies might be behind it? You didn't make any inquiries along those lines?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. These decisions, as you'll see in the material I will produce, were made in 24, 48, 72 hours. So I didn't decide to hire a company. I was wondering if we had the resources within government with staff augmentation to do it, and I decided that would give us more flexibility and more control. I didn't want to make a decision against Deloitte. I was against the complete outsourcing, which would not give us the required control and flexibility.
Thank you, sir. I'll jump in there. I think I understand what your testimony is in this regard. So effectively, you are pointing the finger at the implication of what you're saying is that Mr. McDonald repeatedly lied to this committee, whole hog fabricated events. You worked with Mr. McDonald a lot. Are you surprised by that? What's your response to having discovered that, in your view, he's presented testimony that isn't accurate?
Thank you for the question. I had a lot of trust in Mr. McDonald. He got a lot done over many years, and he helped put us on a path that allowed us to do ArriveCAN. I was very disappointed and hurt and personally affected, and my career has been affected by some of the testimony that was provided. Now, there's a lot of, over the 2-hour period that Mr. McDonald was here, there was a lot said. I can't opine on every single statement, but some of them that were directed at me have personally affected me and my mental health since that time. I've been disappointed by it. I was surprised by it. That was not the Cameron McDonald or Mr. McDonald that I've worked with over many years. He was somebody that worked hard, as you will see from the emails, from 11 p.m. He'd work until 11 p.m., right until 7 a.m., and start again at 7 a.m. So I was disappointed and upset at that testimony.
Did you have a relationship with Mr. Firth at all?
Thank you for the question. I do not.
Have you ever met him?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I have.
Okay, how many times have you met him outside the office?
I have not met him outside the office. I met him he was present at the Bottler demo in November, and I don't remember if he was virtual, but I believe it was so because it was pandemic. He was also present at the meeting where the demo was provided to the president.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Chair, we clearly have a significant conflict in terms of testimony between senior public servants, and I find this dynamic very, very disturbing. I'd like the committee to request phone records, text message records of conversations between Mr. Firth and Mr. McDonald, and any records that may exist between Mr. Firth and Mr. Doan, dating back for the last 5 years. So phone and text message records between Mr. Doan and Mr. Firth, and between Mr. McDonald and Mr. Firth, and that those would be provided to the committee within 2 weeks by the individuals on both ends of those exchanges. I hope I have agreement to the committee to make those requests.
Thank you, Mr. Genwes. I see thumbs up around the room. Wonderful. Our clerk has it all written down. He will follow up with the appropriate departments. Thanks very much.